in New York. The United States just attacked Venezuela's capital, hitting a military this operation. There were multiple.
Late last night and early today,
and captured President Nicolas Maduro.
Este es nuestro patrio trasero.
The conflict between the U.S. and Venezuela. Did you know there's been a biblical prophecy about this foretold long ago? Just in the first 3 days of 2026, bombs were exploding, fires raging non-stop, the ground shaking like it was crying out in anger. The U.S. struck right into Venezuela, a quick raid, grabbing the country's leader, leading to bloodshed and chaos spreading everywhere. At the same time, an earthquake tore through Mexico. Fires swallowed up those fancy New Year's parties in Europe. Blizzards buried parts of America under deadly cold. It all hit at once, no warning, no time for folks to get ready. Was this just a coincidence, or a sign that's been warned about for a long time? Do you feel how urgent things are getting? If the world changes tomorrow, are you ready? Stick around for the next part, and if you can, leave a prayer in the comments for the world, for your family, and for yourself, that the Lord keeps you safe in these troubled days ahead. And now, let's dive deeper together into the shocking truth that God mentioned a long time ago about the conflict between the U.S. and Venezuela, the situation between the U.S. and Venezuela right now. In the first days of 2026, international news kept getting interrupted by flashing red emergency alerts. In just a few hours, the fragile peace in Latin America was torn apart when the United States launched a big military operation against Venezuela. What we thought was just diplomatic tension has now crossed the line into open conflict, happening so fast the world couldn't keep up. On January 3rd, 2026, coordinated airstrikes hit Caracas and several military targets in northern Venezuela. Reports spreading across global media say the operation involved about 150 planes taking off from more than 20 U.S. bases, from Florida down to the Caribbean. In less than a day, the Venezuelan government confirmed that President Nicolas Maduro and his wife had been captured in a quick raid and flown out of the country. The early casualty numbers shocked people around the world. At least 115 are believed dead in the Caribbean area and suburbs, with hundreds more hurt. Satellite photos and videos going viral on social media show black smoke rising from neighborhoods, traffic completely stopped, and folks rushing out of their homes in panic. For many of us, those scenes aren't distant news anymore. They bring a real sense of worry close to home. Right after the operation, tough statements from Washington added fuel to the fire. The U.S. president said America would take over running Venezuela to keep the region stable and protect global energy security. That quickly sparked heated debate. Since Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves, around 300 billion barrels, more than Saudi Arabia, to a lot of observers, oil isn't just in the background anymore. It's front and center in this fight. World reactions came almost right away. Russia and China both strongly condemned the U.S. military action, calling it a serious violation of international law and national sovereignty. In Latin America, governments in the region voiced worries that a wider war could easily break out. Colombia and Brazil started tightening border controls, getting ready for a new wave of refugees everyone knows is coming. In all this, daily life for Venezuelans quickly turned into an emergency. Even before the bombs fell, the country was struggling with inflation, once estimated over 1,000%, long food shortages, and rising violence. After the airstrikes, hospitals in Caracas and big cities were overwhelmed, power and water cut off, and long lines of people desperately trying to leave town. Looking at the whole picture, it's hard not to think of old warnings about war and chaos. In the book of Matthew 24:6, Jesus said, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place." Back then, those words weren't seen as news, but set against today's flood of reports, they feel like an eerie mirror. At the same time, economies tied to global energy supplies started shaking. Crude oil prices jumped wildly in just hours after the conflict news spread. Experts warned that if this drags on, the world could face a new energy crisis, leading to more inflation and unrest in countries already fragile from past global shocks. On social media, especially X, tons of posts analyze how Russia and China are quietly backing Venezuela through oil, gold, and financial deals. Even without official confirmation, that chatter is enough to raise fears that the US-Venezuela clash isn't just between two countries. It could turn into a proxy war among big powers. For a lot of us, the feeling that the world is getting pulled into something bigger is getting stronger. The book of Ezekiel 38:12 mentions armies marching to seize, spoil, and carry off plunder. Reading that verse now, with Venezuela's oil routes, ports, and resources in the spotlight, plenty of folks wonder if it's just history repeating itself, or a pattern humanity never really learns from. In Europe and Asia, diplomatic responses keep showing how serious this is. The European Union put out a statement with deep concern and called for restraint, while Singapore, a key financial hub, warned about ripple effects on world trade. Those statements sound familiar, but this time, they come with a sense that old ways of handling crises are losing their power. In the middle of all these headlines, it's easy to get lost in numbers, maps, and strategy talk, and forget that behind every story are millions of lives turned upside down. Families leaving their homes, kids growing up to air raid sirens, and once busy cities now quiet and tense. This isn't just about one faraway country. It's a reminder of how fragile our world really is. The book of Luke 21:25 talks about times when nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. That verse doesn't name any country, but the confusion and fear it describes matches the global mood right now strangely well. War doesn't just happen on battlefields. It creeps into people's minds through every news alert and image. At this point, no one can say for sure where the US-Venezuela conflict will end or what fallout we'll see in the coming months. The only thing clear is that the world order is going through some heavy shaking, where what used to feel stable now seems shakier than ever. And with these signs piling up, the big question hangs in the air. Is this just another geopolitical crisis, or the first piece of a much bigger picture we're about to face? The prophecy about wars and rumors of wars. Matthew 24:6-8. Jesus said this a long time ago, way before anyone had modern political maps. You will hear about wars and rumors of wars. Don't panic. Those things have to happen. But it's not the end yet. One nation will rise up against another, and one country against another. There'll be famines and earthquakes in different places. But all that is just the beginning of the troubles. His words didn't start with comfort. They started with a straight warning about what people would have to face. When you put this Bible verse next to what's going on between the United States and Venezuela, it's hard not to see the connection. Before any real bombs fell, the world spent months hearing rumors of war, strategic bombers flying around, exercises right near the border, one tough statement after another. We've heard it, we've seen it, and we've gotten used to those signs until they turned into something real that can't be denied. Starting in 2025, a lot of defense news reported more military activity around the Caribbean area. Those long flights by strategic bombers covering thousands of miles, joint exercises, and shifting alliances weren't secrets anymore. Back then, it all got called something safe: deterrence. But by early 2026, the line between deterrence and actual war was completely gone. Matthew 24 doesn't stop at rumors. It goes on to say one nation will rise against another. When US forces got directly involved, when a head of state was captured, and when other big powers reacted right away, those old words suddenly carried new weight. For you and for all of us, the question isn't whether there's war anymore. It's where we are in this warning. The scary part of the prophecy isn't that it predicts one specific war, it's that it describes a pattern that keeps repeating. Wars following wars, trouble piling on trouble. Jesus didn't say people would learn their lesson and stop. No, he made it clear these things have to happen. That's not guesswork, it's something unavoidable. Ezekiel 38:7-9 goes further, talking about alliances forming before big invasions. Get ready, be prepared. You and all the hordes gathered around you. After many days, you will be called to arms. Looking at how Russia and Iran responded to the Venezuela conflict, it's tough not to think of the alliances described there. Military and economic ties that seemed separate are now coming together around the same hotspot. What really shocks a lot of folks isn't the war itself, it's the reasons behind it. Venezuela isn't just some random country on the map. It's got the world's largest proven oil reserves, around 300 billion barrels, a number big enough to shape global policy. When resources become the center of the fight, the prophecy in Ezekiel starts looking even clearer. Ezekiel 38:12 says, "You will go up to plunder and loot, to turn your hand against lands that were ruined, but now have people living there again, against a people gathered from the nations who have livestock and goods." Even though it was written in ancient times, this verse describes exactly the kind of drive that's repeated through human history, resources leading the way for weapons. When you look at Venezuela in that light, the match is worth thinking about. Maybe what worries people most is how fast it's all moving. Things that used to take decades to build up now happen in months or even weeks. Those rumors quickly turn into military action, and that action sets off a chain reaction around the world. We're living in a time when the Bible's warnings aren't delayed by distance or time anymore. Matthew 24:7 goes on. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. Around the same time the conflict broke out, the world also saw natural disasters, food shortages, and supply chain breakdowns. Sure, each one can be explained on its own, but when they hit all at once, they paint a bigger picture. Just like the Bible says, these signs don't come alone, they come in waves. For you, this might feel familiar. Turn on the news, and everything seems to be getting worse, like the world has lost its brakes. For us, that familiarity is the most dangerous part. God's word doesn't warn us to cause panic, it's to keep us from going numb to the clear signs. Ezekiel 38:11-12 talks about a land without walls, a place that's vulnerable to stronger forces. Venezuela, with its long economic struggles and instability, fits that picture in a frightening way. When a country is weak inside but rich in resources and becomes a target, the Bible stops feeling like ancient history. It's a warning ringing out today. The key point in Matthew 24 isn't describing disasters. It's that phrase, the beginning of birth pains. That means the wars and chaos aren't the peak, they're the start. Once you see that, the surprise over the connections turns into a more serious question. If this is just the beginning, what's waiting ahead? The Bible steps forward like a direct warning, like a trumpet blast on the city wall. Not to scare us, but to wake us up. Not to list every detail of events, but to point out the path humanity is on. Like Matthew 24:8 says, all these are the beginning of birth pains. When you put that verse against the US, Venezuela conflict, and all the global upheaval around it, it's hard to call it random coincidence. God's word doesn't say everything will end right away. It hints that a bigger chain of events is starting. At this point, the warning is clearer than ever. It's not about who's right or wrong in one fight. It's about where humanity stands in the timeline the Bible described long ago. And if the trumpet has sounded, what happens when the rest of the prophecy keeps unfolding? If war is just the starting point, then what the Bible describes next is what should really make the world tremble. And that's exactly where this story has to go from here. The United States as the Great Babylon in Revelation. The darkness in Revelation doesn't start with a map or a specific name. It uses symbols, images layered on top of one another, like someone deliberately hiding the truth behind layers of code. When modern numbers, alliances, and wars are placed alongside those symbols, they start to mirror each other. And right then, we who are living in this time can't just stand back and watch like it's some distant story. If war used to appear as the first loud noise, here the bigger picture starts to come into view. A woman dressed in purple and scarlet, drunk on power and wealth, sitting on a strange beast, ruling over the kings of the earth. That image in Revelation isn't meant to retell old history. It's more like a code sent to the future, waiting until the world is ready to see itself in it. Revelation 17:5 gives the first real key, when John writes the symbolic name plain and clear before letting the reader match it up. On her forehead was written a name, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. Many Bible scholars today believe this Babylon isn't an actual city made of bricks anymore. It's a picture of a global power system where economy, culture, and political influence all blend together. In that view, the United States often comes up as a clear example to look at, not out of love or hate, but because of its real role in the world order. With the biggest economy on the planet, the US dollar is the main currency for payments, controlling trade, finance, and public debt for dozens of countries. American culture, from movies and music to consumer lifestyles, seeps into every corner of the globe, creating an appeal that's both attractive and controversial. Revelation 18:3 describes plainly how Babylon works before it falls, and this verse is often held up as a mirror to today's reality. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living. Here, immorality isn't just about personal morals, it's about power compromises. When nations and economic elites tie their interests to one wealthy, powerful center. In that context, Venezuela is often mentioned as a prime example of a relationship that's both cooperative and confrontational. The country has estimated oil reserves of around 300 billion barrels, the largest in the world, and it was once a key energy supplier to international markets. When economic interests mix with politics and ideology, conflict is hard to avoid, and every move carries consequences far beyond one nation's borders. Revelation 18:13 lists the goods that make Babylon rich, from gold and silver to very specific items, and among them is oil. This detail surprises a lot of folks, not because it proves anything absolute, but because the similarity is hard to ignore between the ancient description and today's energy-based global economy. Oil isn't just fuel, it's power, a political tool, and the cause of more than a few wars over the past century. Still, not everyone in the Christian community agrees with this interpretation. Some conservative pastors and scholars say the Great Babylon refers to an invisible global system that could include many countries at once, not just pinned on the United States. Others think it's a picture of a decaying civilization in general, where people worship material things and power more than God. And any nation heading down that path carries the spirit of Babylon. The debate gets heated when modern preachers like Jonathan Cahn connect the United States to ancient Israel, arguing that a country founded on faith but drifting from its core values will face similar judgment. On the other side, critics point out that linking prophecy to specific political events can oversimplify things dangerously and miss the Bible's historical context. Amid these differing views, one detail often stands out as a symbolic irony. In public messages, Venezuelan leaders have repeatedly called for prayer, mentioning Jesus and national faith as a spiritual anchor. In contrast, U.S. decisions in international crises are usually framed in terms of interests, security, and strategy. This contrast, whether surface level or deeper, can make you wonder, is this clash not just between nations, but between two ways of seeing power and faith? Revelation 18:2 rings out like an uncompromising declaration, and it's the part that makes many people uneasy when comparing it to today. Fallen, fallen, is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons. In the Bible's flow, this collapse doesn't come purely from outside forces. It's the inevitable result of a system pushing itself to the limit through ambition and pride. The question isn't really whether America is Babylon or not. It's how much of the Babylon spirit described in Revelation shows up in the modern world. When we look at global trade, energy dependence, and nations willing to bend morals for gain, that question is tough to dodge. And right there, a quiet pause comes in, forcing each of us to place ourselves in the big picture. If Babylon isn't just a place, but a system, a spirit, then where do we stand in it? Are we benefiting, opposing, or just watching from the sidelines? These connections between Revelation and the modern world aren't a final verdict. They're an invitation to think deeper. Because if the Great Babylon is really present in some form today, then the collapse described in Scripture isn't a far-off future story anymore. It's a process, quietly unfolding. And from there, the story has to move to an even deeper level, where the next trumpets sound, revealing what the world, up to now, isn't ready to face. Venezuela in Prophecy, the southern land, and how God's word is coming true. You see thin, tired faces standing in long lines at soup kitchens, skinny kids holding tight to the few bags of food they get, patients spilling out into hospital hallways because there's no medicine. These aren't rare sights anymore. They've become part of everyday life in Venezuela. Streets that used to be busy are now lined with locked-up metal gates. Markets sit quiet, and money loses value faster than people can keep hope alive. In all this, folks don't come across as just numbers in reports, but as real lives caught in a storm that's out of control. History has seen plenty of great empires fall apart from the inside out. The Roman Empire collapsed when its economy went off track and morals broke down. Ancient Babylon was rich and powerful, then turned to dust because of idol worship and treating people badly. Venezuela, in the 21st century, is different in some ways, but it has familiar patterns. A country full of natural resources, yet its people go hungry. A government that controls everything but can't provide basic needs. These similarities make a lot of us stop and think, because history doesn't usually repeat exactly, but the same kinds of rules often come back around. In Daniel 11:44-3, the prophecy talks about a clash between the king of the south and the king of the north, where powers fight over control and wealth. At the time of the end, the king of the south will push against him, and the king of the north will storm at him like a whirlwind. Those words, when you look at geography and today's alliances, lead some to point to Venezuela as part of that south, rich in resources, unstable, and caught in global power plays, not because of the name, but because of its place and situation. When crowds of Venezuelans cross into Colombia, Brazil, or even farther to make a living, it naturally makes you ask, how can a country with the world's top oil reserves let its people end up like this? And if history shows these kinds of tragedies don't just happen by chance, is what's going on now part of an old pattern repeating? These questions aren't meant to jump to quick answers, but to open up a bigger view of causes and what comes after. Ezekiel 38:12 talks about what drives alliances in troubled times. To take plunder and booty, to turn your hand against lands that were ruined, but now have people living there again. These words don't just describe a military attack. They uncover the real nature of fights dressed up as politics. Venezuela, with its oil, gold, and minerals, draws in outside powers, while showing how fragile a nation gets when its own strength weakens. Looking back at Egypt in the book of Exodus, the 10 plagues weren't just supernatural events. They were a judgment on a stubborn, idol-worshipping system of power. Exodus 7-12 records a series of disasters that forced an empire to face the results of its pride. Venezuela today isn't ancient Egypt, but it's going through modern-day plagues, runaway inflation, shortages of food, disease, violence, and a wave of people leaving like never before. The similarity is in the outcomes, not the exact form. When these pictures show up all the time on the news, many watchers can't help wondering if it's just bad policy or something deeper going on. Some say it all comes down to economics and world politics. Others see hints of a moral law at work. Different views don't change the fact that real people are suffering right now, and the story doesn't stop at Venezuela's borders. Jeremiah 50-51 describes people fleeing when Babylon falls. Get out of Babylon. Save your lives, each one of you. That scene echoes in the groups of people leaving home with just the basics and ongoing worry. Even though the settings are different, the common thread is the breakdown of what once seemed like a stable order. When these words are set beside today's Venezuelans on the move, the Bible stands out like an accusation. It points out that injustice and abuse of power, no matter the era, always lead to collapse. Debates in Christian circles also show the divide in understanding. Some pastors and scholars say prophecies are symbolic and shouldn't be tied directly to one country. Others think the signs are too clear to ignore, and Venezuela is just one early link in a bigger chain of events. Each side has its reasons, but they all agree on this: Bible words aren't there to feed curiosity, but to warn about the results of group choices. Revelation 18 paints merchants mourning when a center of power falls. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her. If today's conflicts keep spreading, the effects won't stay in one country. They'll trigger a worldwide chain: economic, political, and humanitarian. Venezuela, in that light, is like a mirror showing a future others might face if old patterns repeat. What's happening doesn't need harsh judgment. The reality speaks for itself. When history, the present, and Scripture meet at one point, silence weighs more than any conclusion. Because if these signs are just the start of the accusation, then what comes next in the Bible is what should make the world pause and wonder, how far will this chain of events go? Prophecy about a chaotic year, 2026, mankind entering the final times. Time isn't moving slowly anymore. The first days of 2026 hit with a rush of events, like every hour and minute is squeezed tight. The calendar just turned, and the world was already shaking, burning hot and freezing cold all at once. In that feeling, we're not just watching from the outside anymore. We're right in the middle of an urgent reality, where every breath brings questions about what's coming soon. Matthew 24-7, 8 sounds like a warning drum for this time. For nation will rise against nation. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Those words aren't easy comfort. They're straightforward, like a final notice about what comes next. When you put them next to what's happening now, the urgency feels clear, because the signs aren't scattered anymore. They're piling up at the same moment. On January 2, 2026, the ground in Mexico shook with a 6.5 magnitude earthquake in Guerrero, just 35 miles from Acapulco. 2 lives were lost, 17 people hurt, hundreds of homes cracked, and more than 1,070 aftershocks followed like non-stop knocks. That scene wasn't just numbers on a seismograph. It was families panicking in the dark, where the earth isn't a solid base anymore. That fragile feeling is familiar, because we've all known what it's like to feel helpless when something we thought was steady suddenly gives way. Those shakes remind many of what's written in Amos 8:8. Shall not the land tremble on this account? The Bible doesn't give scientific details, but it points straight to how all creation reacts when order breaks down. When the earth trembles, people's hearts do too, and fear spreads like a wave, not just a personal feeling. Right before that, in the early hours of January 1, 2026, at 12:45 a.m., fire broke out at the Vondelkerk in Amsterdam, an old church standing for over 154 years. Those stone walls that had seen generations pray collapsed in flames, leaving ashes and black smoke on the first day of the new year. Many went quiet looking at those pictures, because a sacred symbol burning always touches something deep inside. That sense of loss helps us understand that not everything built by hands lasts forever. Jeremiah 7:14 warned, "I will do to this house as I did to Shiloh." That's not aimed at one spot. It's judgment on empty worship, when people trust buildings more than the one who gives life. The fire in Amsterdam, seen that way, is a serious reminder that symbols can't replace a real relationship. Just minutes later, at 1:30 a.m. on January 1, 2026, a bar in Crans, Montana, Switzerland, went up in flames during a New Year's party. 40 people died. 115 others were hurt. Music and laughter replaced by fire sirens and cries. The contrast is sharp. A moment of celebration turned to mourning in an instant. Looking at that, no one can stay unmoved, because joy can vanish so fast. Revelation 18:8 says, "Therefore her plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine. She will be burned up with fire." That's not meant to spread panic, but to show the inevitable end of endless luxury. When fire comes in one day, all fake security collapses, leaving the plain truth about human life. Around the same time, the Northeast U.S. got hit hard by a snowstorm from January 1 to 3, 2026. Rochester and Buffalo got blanketed with 6 inches. Some areas forecast up to 16 inches, winds gusting 90 miles per hour, and temperatures dropping to -65 degrees Fahrenheit. Roads shut down, power out, families huddled in cold darkness. In that scene, people feel small against nature's power, a feeling we can imagine on those endless winter nights. Isaiah 28:2 says, "Behold, the Lord has one who is mighty, like a storm of hail." Natural disasters don't need long explanations to show power beyond human plans. When snow blocks paths and wind howls through homes, the message is clear. No one controls tomorrow their way. These events don't stand alone. Big fires in Switzerland, floods in Southern California, heavy snow in upstate New York, all crammed into the first days like a chain reaction. That fast pace makes time feel compressed. Hard to call it just coincidence. In the flood of news, it's easy to see the tiredness and worry spreading, because no one knows where the next trouble will hit. Matthew 24 doesn't just list disasters, it puts them in an unstoppable process. These things aren't to feed curiosity, but to wake up consciences. When troubles pile up, the question isn't why, but how do we prepare? That urgency slips into every news report, every picture, every story of loss. Revelation 20:21 opens a view of judgment and a new order, where everything old passes away. Anyone not found written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. That's final judgment language. No room for debate or delay. Putting those words next to early 2026, the sense that time is short gets sharp, like a last bell before the door closes. Amid those sad scenes, faith doesn't come across as some abstract idea, but as the only solid anchor left. Not faith in systems, technology, or prosperity, but in the one above all changes. When everything can fall apart in one day, what's left is our connection to God, where we find peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. Revelation 22:12 ends with a direct promise. "Behold, I am coming soon, bringing my recompense." No safe distance in those words, just a call to decide now. As 2026 starts with disasters and chaos, that message rings louder than ever, urging humanity to face its choices. What happened in those first days doesn't need long commentary to show how serious it is. Reality speaks for itself. When time tightens and signs hit all at once, faith isn't an extra option, it's the way to survive. And right there, the journey doesn't end in fear, but opens a final invitation. Turn back, grab hold of grace, before the door to this era closes for good. Looking back at the whole picture that's unfolded, from the US, Venezuela conflict to the string of disasters hitting hard at the start of 2026, it's clear these things aren't standing alone anymore. Wars, natural disasters, fires, and freezing cold are all showing up at once, like pieces falling into place in some bigger plan. The world isn't just shaking politically, it's being shaken right down to its spiritual foundations, forcing us to face that old question that's never felt more urgent. Who's really in control of history? In Revelation 18:4, the call comes through loud and clear. Come out of her, my people, so you don't share in her sins or get hit with her plagues. This isn't about packing up and moving somewhere else geographically. It's an invitation to separate ourselves from the systems, the lifestyles, and the values that have brought humanity to the edge. When you put this verse alongside everything that's just happened, the message gets real plain. The end times aren't just about what's coming, they're about the choice we have to make right now. The big picture the Bible paints doesn't end in darkness. Even with empires falling and fear spreading everywhere, the promise of Jesus coming back remains the bright light all the way through. In Matthew 24 and Revelation 22, his return isn't described as a disaster for those who are awake and watching. It's the fulfillment of justice and hope. Repentance isn't some abstract idea anymore. It becomes the only way out of the cycle of judgment and into salvation. 2026 may be roaring with war and calamity, but that doesn't mean the world's been abandoned. On the contrary, it's right in the middle of all this chaos that God's sovereign rule shows itself clearer than ever. When people finally see their own limits, faith stops being just an optional extra and becomes the real place of refuge. Staying alert, repenting, and praying won't make the events go away, but they will help keep our hearts steady in the storm. So the call right now isn't to fear, it's to act in faith. Take time to pray for this hurting world, for your family, and for your own heart, to stay fixed on the Lord. Be bold in sharing your faith, because even one small testimony could become a light for someone else in these dark times. And if you can, leave a prayer or a sincere thought in the comments below as a sign of staying awake and standing together in faith. If this has touched your heart, liking, sharing, and subscribing isn't just support. It's a way to make sure others don't miss these warnings and calls to God's love. Every share could open a door for someone searching for answers in the middle of the chaos. Finally, thank you to everyone who stayed until the end. May the Lord protect you and your family, give you peace that goes beyond understanding, and keep you all in His loving arms, no matter how much the world around us keeps shaking. Amen.
We're afraid that the American
They really bring out a lot of energy.
January 1st, teens under 6.
There's been protesters killed in Iran. You said we were.
Cuba is, not doing very well right now.
14-year-old son is on YouTube and Snapchat at least 2 hours a day. The middle schooler says,
"Do you believe that America was prophesied by God long ago about what would happen in 2026? The signs are coming thick and fast now, like warning trumpets echoing from the past, pointing to a year full of challenges. Crises exploding, society in upheaval, politics tense, the economy up and down, weather wreaking havoc without mercy. Do you feel that fear spreading around you? And have you prepared your heart for what's ahead? It all seems to be urging us to pause, reflect, and turn back to faith. Please write a prayer in the comments below for America to have peace in the midst of the 2026 storm. Because right after this, we're going to dive deep into all the events and uncover the full truth that's been appointed for America in 2026. And I won't keep you waiting long. We'll start right away with the first major event: Christian persecution surging in Nigeria and Africa. Are we really living up to the old prophetic warnings for America in 2026? Right from the start of the year, the news hit like a bolt out of the blue, forcing us to face some troubling realities. On January 1st, 2026, the charity Church Times put out a shocking alert, saying the number of Christians killed in Nigeria could double from the year before. More than 7,000 had lost their lives in just the first 220 days of 2025. And now this wave of persecution is spreading to the North Kivu area in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the village of Katanga got hit by one attack after another. All this news isn't just some far-off story. It's ringing a clear bell for our faith today. Africa is sinking deeper into chaos over resources and religious extremism, with Nigeria, the continent's most populous country, seeing armed groups target Christian communities to grab economic and political power. Starting in 2025, hundreds have been kidnapped and forced to flee their homes, creating streams of scared refugees. International Christian Concern reported that on January 1st, 2026, in Katanga, North Kivu, about 1,200 miles from Lagos, rebels killed dozens of innocent believers, leaving behind heartbreak to start the new year. Meanwhile, in places like New York and Chicago, African-American Christian communities are protesting strongly, calling on the U.S. government to step in harder and protect their brothers and sisters. In the middle of all this troubling news, the Bible stands out like a firm light with its warnings. Matthew chapter 5, verses 10 through 12 reminds us, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven." God's word echoes loud and clear, saying persecution isn't the end. It's a big test of faith. Then Revelation chapter 6, verses 9 through 11 sounds like a wake-up call. "I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God." Wait a little longer. These verses help us see that the bigger the trial, the stronger our faithfulness needs to be. Looking through the lens of prophecy, what's happening in Africa is signaling a similar test coming for America in 2026. Faith here in the U.S. could face attacks, challenges, and upheaval from new conflicts we can't fully see yet. The Lord is warning that even a nation long seen as a stronghold of religious freedom needs to get ready for darker days. If Americans don't turn back with repentance and unite in prayer, spiritual chaos could easily break out right here at home. But the story still has a big open space waiting ahead. Will America in 2026 stand up to defend our faith, or get swept into the world's fearful currents? The future isn't fully written, and that's what draws us to keep going. Let's join together and leave prayers in the comments for America to have peace through this turbulent 2026. Because the challenges are closer than ever. Interfaith Alliance pushes for a religious forum at the G20 in 2026. A small piece of news slipped out quietly at the start of 2026, but it carried a mysterious feel to it. On January 2nd, 2026, according to Religion News Service, Cardinal Timothy Dolan and more than 80 religious leaders in the United States sent an urgent letter to President Donald Trump. The letter asked the U.S. government to add an official religious forum to the agenda of the G20 summit that America would host in Washington, D.C. It all happened pretty quietly, leaving you and a lot of folks wondering why religion was suddenly front and center in an event that's usually just about economics and politics. The background to this request really gets you thinking. 2025 saw all kinds of reports about religious freedom declining around the world, from tough restrictions in Belarus to extreme violence in Nigeria. As noted by the Diocese of Scranton, this new interfaith alliance formed to fight extremism and protect minority faith communities. Unlike the existing G20 Interfaith Forum, this effort wants a stronger voice right inside the official U.S. government setup. You can sense that deep desire for unity, trying to work its way into the halls of worldly power. Things have gotten a lot more dramatic. From New York, Cardinal Dolan is leading the push, calling for religion to be included in the G20 set for November 2026 in the nation's capital. Platforms like Threads and Facebook are spreading the alliance's message far and wide, reaching millions of believers across the states. Many U.S. political experts say this move could directly shape the G20 agenda, where leaders from 19 countries, plus the European Union, are expected to gather. We're watching two worlds, faith and politics, starting to collide in very real ways, with numbers and media pressure. International analysts see this as a soft strategy to build agreement in troubled times. They believe adding interfaith dialogue to the G20 could ease ethnic tensions and cultural conflicts in our globalized world. From a secular view, it's just smart diplomacy. But when you turn to the Bible, you're invited to see it differently, beyond everyday logic. The Bible acts like a parallel lens, not denying science, but revealing deeper, mysterious layers. The Bible plays a special role in decoding it all. Isaiah 2-4 says, "He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples." They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Psalm 133:1 declares, "How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity." Amos 5:24 calls out, "But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream." These verses help us see that the call for unity in Washington, D.C. isn't just diplomatic. It's like an echo of ancient prophecies coming alive in today's America. Comparing the two views, you can feel the clear difference. The world talks strategy, while faith talks God's plan. Experts see social causes, but the Bible sees divine purposes guiding U.S. history toward 2026. That final thought lingers. We're being invited into a different awareness, where faith stands above ordinary political debates. The interfaith letter is still sitting on the desk at the White House, waiting for a decision. The G20 summit in November 2026 in Washington, D.C. is getting closer every day. The shadow of global division still looms ahead, while you and I keep watching America's journey through this unfinished prophecy. Virginia's law limiting kids' social media use. The start of 2026 brings a heavy feeling that's hard to put into words. Right on, January 1st, 2026, local news in Virginia all reported on the new law that limits how much time kids can spend on social media. Stories from Fox 5 DC and NBC Washington pointed out the rule that bans kids under 16 from using more than 1 hour a day on each platform. The worry isn't really about that plain number. It's about the bigger question of where protection ends and control begins. Looking back at 2025, Virginia was right in the middle of heated debates about teens' mental health. Governor Youngkin signed changes to the Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act, the VCDPA, and new rules under the VCDPA 2026. State leaders say social media is like an epidemic that's hurting students' focus, raising depression, and making kids feel more alone. Laws like the VCDPA were updated to give parents more power, but they also put a heavy load of responsibility on them. In Richmond, the state capital, the law officially started on January 1st, 2026. It requires parents' verified permission before kids can even create an account. According to reports on Instagram and from station WDBJ, 7 million of kids across the Northeast are directly affected. Schools, libraries, and community centers suddenly got a lot noisier as students couldn't just scroll freely anymore. Big platforms have to add timers and block access after the limit, bringing a big shift in how things work day to day. On parent forums like Facebook, Threads, and Virginia online community groups, opinions are strongly split. One side supports it, saying the law helps their kids break free from digital addiction and brings back peaceful family evenings. The other side calls it an invasion of privacy that makes kids frustrated and more likely to push back against their parents. Groups like WDBJ7 have reported many parents complaining that they now have to constantly monitor and approve each app, adding new stress to family relationships. What do you think about this law and the future for kids in the digital age? In the middle of all these arguments, the Bible stands out as a gentle reminder of our sacred duty. Proverbs 22:6 rings clear. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Those words offer a different view. It's not just about limiting minutes, but about guiding the younger generation to use their freedom wisely. Ephesians 6:4 goes on with balanced advice. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. If controlling social media doesn't come with love and understanding, any rule can backfire. Psalm 127:3 reminds us, Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. A parent's responsibility is greater than any law on the books. From this local event, many watchers believe America is heading into a major turning point in 2026. Other states might follow Virginia's lead, starting a wave of new rules across the country. In the light of faith, we're reminded to stay alert to the digital storms challenging American families. God's word seems to foresee that America's future in 2026 will be closely tied to how we protect the young generation from modern temptations. But the story doesn't end there. Will this law become a model for the whole nation, or get replaced by something completely different? The coming days in Virginia might just be the start of a bigger cultural battle, where the line between freedom and responsibility keeps getting tested. America is changing, and we still have to wait and see what really happens next. Protests in Iran and Trump's involvement. Anger in Iran in early January 2026 spread a scary feeling across international news. Starting January 5, 2026, the protests went on for 9 straight days, according to BBC and Reuters. The streets of Tehran were thick with smoke and chaotic shouting. The world watched the Middle East with deep worry, and it felt like that tension reached all the way to America. Iran's economy in 2025 was described as badly broken down, with skyrocketing inflation, high unemployment, and the local currency losing value fast. In Tehran, thousands of people poured into Azadi Square and main streets to protest the government. Security forces set up barriers and arrested many protesters, creating a picture of society on the edge of collapse. In Washington, D.C., President Trump kept sending strong warnings about the risk of violent crackdowns. In the middle of all that chaos, the Iranian community in Los Angeles, over 7,500 miles from Tehran, got caught up in the wave of anger too. Local California media reported gatherings in front of Iran's old consulate. Family members called home in fear, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. The Bible suddenly felt like a reminder about justice among nations in turmoil. Jeremiah 22:3 speaks out strongly against all kinds of harsh rule. This is what the Lord says: "Do what is just and right. Rescue from the hand of the oppressor, the one who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the foreigner, the fatherless or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place." Those words weren't just for ancient Judah. They seemed to point right at what's happening in Iran today, where innocent blood could be spilled any moment. Pictures from Tehran show a country deeply divided by fear. Reuters reported many markets closed, schools shut down, and traffic almost stopped. The government tried to hold control at any cost, while people just wanted to be heard. Isaiah 1:17 comes across like another call to human conscience. Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. In big U.S. cities like New York and Houston, human rights groups called on the government to keep a close eye on events in Iran. Trump's threats to step in if there was large-scale violence made things even more dramatic. World oil markets fluctuated over worries about supply from the Persian Gulf. Something happening halfway around the world from America could shake up politics in Washington during 2026. Looking through the light of faith, Iran's chaotic security situation seems like a test for the whole free world. The tension between Tehran and Washington, D.C. brings back memories of dark days the prophets warned about when it comes to protecting innocent people. We see clearly that power without a foundation of justice leads to downfall. That's why the Bible becomes a mirror for every nation walking through uncertainty. From this chain of international events kicking off the new year, many observers think America in 2026 is at a key moment too. To intervene or not, to listen or turn away, these are heavy choices facing the U.S. government. God's word seems to prophesy that the future of nations will turn on justice and kindness. But will Trump's decisions be enough to change things in Iran? Or will the chaos spread even more? The days ahead are still hidden in fog, waiting to clear up. U.S. attacks Venezuela, captures Maduro. On January 3, 2026, a quick military operation reported by CBS News and Brookings shook all of Latin America. More than 150 U.S. fighter jets took off, tearing across the sky over Caracas. It was big news that painted a scary picture of how power can change a country's fate in just a few hours, and we have to face that reality. From Miami, Florida, to Caracas is about 2,500 miles. But that night, the distance seemed to vanish. Squads of F-35 seconds and F-22 seconds roared in, dropping troops into the Venezuelan capital. American special forces surrounded the presidential palace, took control, and arrested Nicolas Maduro under a drug warrant from 2020. In less than 24 hours, Maduro was flown to New York for a federal court appearance. Word from the Cuban government said 32 of their citizens were killed, sparking worry all across the Caribbean. The operation was described as a lightning-fast attack, with thousands of troops involved, aircraft carriers close to the coast, and cruise missiles ready to fire. the global energy market got rattled because Caracas is a major oil hub in South America. Brookings experts said capturing Maduro would leave a huge power vacuum, raising the risk of armed fights between factions. Just one decision from Washington, D.C. could spark unrest across the continent, and the idea of world war doesn't seem so far off anymore. The Bible came up amid all the heavy military news as a warning about the sword of justice. Romans chapter 13 verse 4 says, "For he is God's servant for your good, but if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer." Those words feel like a key to understanding the big question of our time, how power and justice should go hand in hand during political chaos. Right after Maduro was arraigned in New York, big cities like Houston and Atlanta saw marches by Venezuelan immigrants. Thousands of new refugees poured across the border into Colombia, according to the International Crisis Group. The huge numbers on migration and economic losses keep piling up. The Bible spoke up again like a reminder of God's supreme rule. Isaiah chapter 21, verse 1 says, "The oracle concerning the wilderness at sea, as whirlwinds in the Negeb sweep on, it comes from the wilderness, from a terrible land." No, wait, actually a better fit is, "The heart of the king is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will." The world is looking at the White House, waiting for Trump's next move. Will this operation bring a new era of stability to Venezuela, or just start a bigger chain of conflicts? Psalm chapter 146, verse 7 stands out like a mirror for what every government should do. Who executes justice for the oppressed? Who gives food to the hungry? The Lord sets the prisoners free. But history always shows that justice never comes without a price. This military event in Caracas puts America in 2026 in a mysterious spot. Bible prophecies seem to be urging you, as leaders, to choose the path of righteousness. But after Venezuela, where will the next storm hit? Will the Americas stay calm, or will the chaos spread fast to other lands? And the next part might be even scarier than anything we've seen so far. Trump threatens Colombia, Cuba, Greenland, and other countries. On the 4th of January 2026, from Washington, D.C., President Trump sent out tough statements aimed right at Colombia, Cuba, Greenland, and several other nations, according to CNN and Axios. Those strong words rang out like war drums pounding away without stop. International news reports lit up right away, drawing the whole world into a swirl of tense uncertainty. You and I can both sense the global political air shifting every hour. After the military campaign in Venezuela, the U.S. administration announced an expansion of the cross-border war on drugs. Trump accused Colombia of not cooperating fully in controlling the transport routes. For Cuba, he predicted a chain reaction of economic and political collapse if it kept opposing the United States. As for Greenland, that territory, about 2,000 miles from America's east coast, it became the focus when Trump openly suggested annexing it to secure Arctic security interests. These remarks immediately stirred up diplomatic waves from Bogota to Havana and Copenhagen. The named countries reacted sharply. Colombia summoned the U.S. ambassador to protest, affirming its sovereignty and national honor. Cuba condemned it fiercely, saying the U.S. was looking for excuses to widen conflicts. Denmark's government, which oversees Greenland, stated that any territorial changes must follow international law. European and South American media all ran analyses saying the world was facing a new spark that could ignite a large-scale war. Many experts worry that if these threats turn into real military action, the political map in 2026 will be redrawn with violence. Amid that heat, the UN Security Council had to hold an emergency meeting in New York. A series of regional peace conferences were urgently called in Mexico City and Panama City to prevent armed confrontations. Diplomats warned that just one wrong move could trigger a chain reaction among major powers. People in many countries started stockpiling food, and financial markets plunged over fears of world war. You're living in a time when peace might be more fragile than ever before. In the midst of this political storm, the Bible appears as a guiding light on justice. Isaiah chapter 40 verse 23 says, "He brings princes to naught and reduces the rulers of this world to nothing." Those words lead many to believe that all earthly power has limits and the arrogance of leaders will eventually face the highest judgment. Debates inside America flared up just as much. On forums in Florida, Texas, and Minnesota, some strongly supported Trump's hard stance, seeing it as protecting national interests. On the other hand, many anti-war groups in New York and San Francisco criticized it, fearing the U.S. government was pushing the world toward disaster. U.S. media polls showed nearly 48% of respondents backing diplomatic pressure, while 37% opposed any idea of using military force in neighboring countries. In that picture, questions about national responsibility and ethics keep getting dissected. Jeremiah chapter 18 verses 7 to 8 rings out like another key for human conscience. At one moment, I might speak concerning a nation or kingdom that I will pluck up, break down, and destroy it. But if that nation turns from its evil, I will relent and not inflict on it the disaster I had planned. The Bible offers a view totally different from modern politics, stressing repentance and inner change instead of outside violence. Since Venezuela, this string of diplomatic threats kicking off January shows that 2026 could be a year full of upheaval for America. Many Bible scholars and pastors in the southern U.S. states affirm that God is using these shifts to remind the leading nation of the free world about its duty to justice. Our children's future will depend on decisions made in those power rooms in Washington. But after all those pounding words, what will really happen to Colombia, Cuba, or Greenland? And what price will America pay? The next chapters of 2026 are still a big blank waiting to be filled. Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act aims to boost growth. Starting the first day of 2026, the tax cut package, called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, officially takes effect, bringing some of the biggest tax refunds we've ever seen. Ever wonder what you'd do if your paycheck suddenly got a lot bigger? The economy back then looked bright in some ways, but it was also full of ups and downs. On the financial news, Wall Street kept jumping with all those growth numbers. Businesses expanded their investments, folks spent more freely, and money poured into the economy, estimated in the tens of billions of dollars. GDP was expected to improve, but everyday living costs started shifting too. Many working families really felt the change in their wallets. Some were happy about it. Others worried about what was coming next. In the middle of all that change, the Bible offers a gentle reminder about lasting direction. Matthew chapter 6 verse 33 says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." Material prosperity can come quick, but faith is the foundation that helps people stay balanced through any changes. Not everyone sees the tax cut package the same way. Strong supporters believe it's a blessing that builds national strength, opening doors for jobs and new ideas. They think raising the deduction limit to $40,400 was the right move to free up the economy. On the other hand, some opponents argue hard that it could widen the gap between rich and poor and push inflation higher. Heated debates popped up everywhere, from coffee shops and schools to Congress. What about you? Where do you stand on this? Proverbs in the Old Testament also comes up a lot when people talk about wealth. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 to 10 says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine." Those words remind us that any gains, whether from policy or the market, should be used with gratitude and fairness. Real life in 2026 showed that economic joy didn't spread evenly. Some states benefited a lot from higher spending, but others struggled with rising costs for housing and healthcare. Experts warned about possible asset bubbles, while regular folks just hoped to keep steady jobs to support their families. Uncertainty became a common topic, leading many to look for spiritual values instead of just chasing flashy numbers. Psalm 37, verse 21 reminds us, "The righteous give generously." The economy might get a push from tax cut decisions, but kindness is the true measure of a healthy society. Faith calls us to look beyond short-term gains toward the common good. Trump's tax cut package in 2026 became a focal point of both hope and challenge. Some believe God is blessing America with a new golden era, but there are also cautious voices reminding us of responsibility and awareness. The road ahead still has plenty of unknown turns, and the big question about the future of the U.S. economy remains open. waiting for answers from everyday Americans. Stock market forecast to reach 7,500, 8,000 points. Forecasts suggest the U.S. stock market will rise strongly in 2026, pushing the S&P 500 toward the 7,500 to 8,000 point range. The gain is estimated at about 8.8 to 15.5%, thanks to better company profits and the growing wave of AI technology. Can you feel the exciting pulse of the financial markets in this historic time? Things on the trading floors aren't as calm as those positive numbers might look. At the New York Stock Exchange, the electronic boards keep changing colors hour by hour, showing how investor feelings shift in unpredictable ways. Economic reports, interest rate decisions, and geopolitical news create one wave of ups and downs after another. Experts keep a neutral tone, pointing out that growth always comes with risks. Big investment funds like CIBC or JP Morgan give positive views, but they also warn about the chance of a deep pullback if expectations get too high. The reasons for all this movement come from many balanced viewpoints. Some experts say cheap money in earlier years pushed stock prices up faster than real value. Others believe deep digital changes in the economy are opening a new era, where AI helps companies cut costs and build lasting profits. Future forecasts vary a lot. Some see a long upward cycle. Others spot risks of an asset bubble. The stock market feels like a vast ocean, shiny on the surface, but hard to read deep down. In the middle of this financial storm, the Bible comes up as a source of wisdom for smart thinking. Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verse 1 says, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again." Those words suggest investing needs patience and a long-term view, not just chasing quick profits. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 22 also reminds us, "The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it." Ancient prophecy advises staying alert and not letting greed guide financial choices. Analysts keep digging deeper into the temptations of profits in 2026. They note that as the S&P 500 nears record highs, excitement might make investors forget basic rules. Hot tech stocks, leveraged trades growing wider, and short-term speculation trends are common signs of an unsteady market. Still, many positive voices rely on solid data, saying company profits are truly getting stronger. The financial game goes on in a mix of hope and caution. 1 Timothy chapter 6 verses 9 to 10 warns, "Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap." Those teachings shed light on a balanced view of the market, advising Americans to weigh opportunities against responsibility. The stock market can be a tool to build wealth, but it can also test human wisdom. Heading into the later months of 2026, the S&P 500 really approaches those forecast levels, but the path is full of twists and mysteries. Some days the market surges with bright earnings reports, other days it drops on inflation worries. Everything happens with the neutral assessments from experts. No one is sure about the road ahead. Even so, many believe this growth is part of God's bigger plan for America. The market keeps moving without stop, opening doors to the future with the hanging question, is 2026 just a short-term peak or the start of a whole new cycle for U.S. finance? Ongoing storms in California bring flooding and heavy snow. These storms are hitting hard one after another. Early in January 2026, California was all over the news like a place going through a real test. Reports from Washington to the West Coast kept mentioning this atmospheric river thing in a straightforward but kind of mysterious way. According to Politico Pro and CNN, on January 5, 2026, the snow buildup on the Sierra Nevada peaks had shot up to nearly 90% of the yearly average. A big jump that's hard to believe from the low 12% noted back on December 19, 2025. The sky was heavy and gray, with rain and wind mixing together, making folks along the coast worried about what was coming next. Are we seeing some kind of warning from nature itself? Nature's fury is sweeping through California. Up in the Sierra Nevada, around 14,000 feet high, the snow is falling thick, like a cold wall of ice. Weather systems recorded rainfall hitting up to 3 inches in just one day, measured the good old American way. The Central Valley is underwater. Highways are closed off, and airports have canceled hundreds of flights. From KCRA and Investors.com, snowpack updates from popular ski spots like Lake Tahoe and Mammoth Mountain come in hour by hour. Those huge numbers on water pouring down show the unstoppable power of these storms. On phone screens, pictures of flooded homes and cars swept away leave people feeling really uneasy. In the middle of all this chaos, the Bible talks about God's power to judge. In Romans chapter 13, verse 4, it says, "For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer." Some folks connect this to how God's justice might come in different ways, even through a country's wild weather changes. Jeremiah chapter 18, verses 7 and 8 also says, "If at any time I declare concerning a nation or a kingdom that I will pluck up and break down and destroy it, and if that nation, concerning which I have spoken, turns from its evil, I will relent of the disaster that I intended to do to it." These words are quoted in a neutral tone, but they ring out like a serious judgment for the land caught up in these storms. The economy is taking a big hit. From CNBC and Brookings, these back-to-back storms early in 2026 have caused tens of billions in damage, messing up food and energy supply chains. Millions have had to leave their homes. Small businesses are going under, and insurance rates are going way up. Experts say if the storms keep going, California's GDP could drop a lot in the first quarter. But all the reports stay objective, and they can't hide the growing unease. What do we think when everyday life can collapse in just a few hours of strong winds? On forums and social media, calls are going out for world peace conferences to meet urgently and stop the risk of global conflicts over resources and politics. These California storms have become a hot debate topic, but the news keeps a neutral voice. Which side will we take in this conversation? As the U.S. year 2026 started off with heavy snow and flooding, talk of purification prophecies is coming up more and more. Weather experts warn that the next waves of storms could be even worse. Will California settle down again, or will the chaos spread to other states, bringing the shadow of World War? The future is still up in the air, leaving viewers anxious for what's next. Polar vortex and stratospheric warming bring extreme cold. In mid-January 2026, weather reports across the United States suddenly turned to icy white screens. Reports from severeweather.eu said a stratospheric warming event had weakened the polar vortex, letting Arctic air spill down over the Midwest. From Chicago to Minneapolis, temperatures dropped way below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and cities that were bustling at the start of the year suddenly felt empty. Streets froze solid, schools shut down, hospitals went into emergency mode. Doesn't it make you worry when winter gets that harsh? The cold hit hard, like an unseen attack. Central states were buried under thick white snow. Using American weather measurements, many spots got more than 20 inches of snow in just a few days. Rescue teams had to travel nearly 2,000 miles from Alaska to bring supplies to cut-off communities. Stadiums, bus stations, shopping centers, all closed. Folks couldn't even get to the grocery store for food and drinks like usual, with shelves empty because roads were paralyzed. Millions of families hunkered down at home, just waiting for help to arrive. The hardship and suffering showed plainly on people's faces in that freezing weather. In the middle of all that, the Bible rings out like a serious reminder. Psalm 147 verse 16 says, "He gives snow like wool. He scatters the frost like ashes." Those words come across neutral but full of authority, showing that nature is under God's control. Weather experts say this mid-January polar vortex breakdown was one of the biggest climate events recorded in decades. The record low temperatures and huge rescue needs leave folks uneasy about what's ahead. Blizzards paralyze America. Interstate highways got blocked. Trains stopped running. Thousands of domestic flights were canceled. According to severe weather.eu, the strong polar vortex from early in the year got completely disrupted by mid-January 2026, spreading extreme cold from north to south. Farms in Iowa and Nebraska lost winter crops because feed couldn't get to the livestock. The poorest neighborhoods had to rely fully on government aid. Revelation chapter 16 verse 21 says, "And great hailstones, about the weight of a talent, came down from heaven upon people, and people blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, since that plague was exceedingly great." That passage hits like a final judgment, stressing God's absolute power over human fate. Talk about weather prophecies for America in 2026 keeps growing. Joshua chapter 10 verse 11 also says, "As they fled before Israel, While they were going down the descent of Beth Horon, the Lord threw down large stones from heaven on them as far as Azekah, and they died. Those words are quoted in a straightforward way, like confirming that any nation can face trials from nature's harsh judgment. On TV screens, pictures of long lines of people waiting miles for relief food in falling snow show how small we are against tough forces. 2026 is turning out to be a year full of upheaval for the United States. Not just politics and military, but especially the weather is becoming a big source of worry around the world. Polar vortex, heavy snow, record cold, all piling up like bells testing faith and awareness. While rescue teams race against time, questions about America's future hang open and mysterious. Will this winter pass quietly, or are more cold waves quietly building on the horizon? The early days of 2026 have kicked off with one big event after another around the world, leaving folks feeling pretty uneasy. From the new law in Virginia limiting kids' time on social media, to protests breaking out in Iran and warnings from the Trump administration about getting involved, the news keeps changing by the hour. Over in Venezuela, the U.S. military operation led to President Maduro being arrested in New York, shaking up all of South America. In Greenland and Colombia, tough talk on drugs and border security has made relations even tenser than before. California is dealing with major storms and flooding, while the Midwest is buried in that deep cold from the polar vortex. It all just piles up, one thing after another, and none of it feels minor. Looking back at those 10 big events, it's clear America is heading into 2026, facing a lot of challenges in politics, society, the economy, and even the weather. Decisions made by leaders in Washington, D.C. hit home for millions of everyday people, from Wall Street to immigrant communities. The economy got a boost from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act tax cuts, expected to bring refunds from $30 to $100 billion and raise the deduction limit to $40,400, which has a lot of folks excited. At the same time, stock market forecasts, with the S&P 500 hitting 7,500 to 8,000 points, are stirring up both hope and worry about finances down the road. While many believe in growth ahead, those storms and record cold snaps remind us how small we really are against nature's power. In the middle of all this chaos, the Bible stands out as a timeless voice. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 23 says, "He brings princes to nothing. He makes the rulers of this world as nothingness. The scored." End quote. Jeremiah chapter 22, verse 3 reminds us, "Do justice and righteousness, and deliver from the hand of the oppressor him who has been robbed." Those verses ring out like a wake-up call for every family and parents about our duty toward our kids' future. Matthew chapter 6, verse 33 teaches, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." As the weather shifts and nations shake, the message of faith and staying alert feels clearer than ever. We're called to wake up. Everyone watching today, repent, pray, and put full trust in the Lord so we don't get swept away in these waves of current events. Whether you support or oppose political decisions, the most important thing is turning toward God's blessings and guidance. Feel free to leave a comment or your own thoughts below to share your view on what's happening. Your honest input helps our community learn more and stay connected. Thanks to all you viewers for joining this look back at the signs of 2026. Please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any key updates in future videos. Praying you and your families receive peace, safety, and blessings from the Lord in the days ahead. No matter how uncertain the future seems, true faith will always be the strongest refuge for every home.
Ali Duplo reports that's
Have you ever wondered, what if the world suddenly started counting time in days instead of years? When the oceans roar and uncover things long buried, when the sky lights up bright and then goes pitch black like it's being torn apart, when mountains shake, the ground splits open, fire crawls like a living creature, and strange sounds echo from the heavens, time doesn't just pass anymore, it's rushing forward. Everything is happening so fast. one thing right after another, like someone is quickly turning the last pages of human history. 10 events, not separate, not scattered. They crash, flood, fall, erupt, swallow, surround. From the sea to the sky, from ice to molten lava, from heavenly light to total darkness. Science tries to name them. People try to get used to them. But there are moments when all that's left is a heavy silence before something big is about to be revealed. What frame of mind are you in while watching this? Curious, skeptical, or uneasy? If something inside you just stirred a little, stick around. And before we go any deeper, please leave a short prayer in the comments below. Not out of fear, but asking for peace for all of us, for you, and for a year that's starting out in the middle of so much chaos. Now, are you ready? We're going to dig deeper and look for the real meaning behind these 10 events. Let's get started right away with 1. The strange fishtail washed up on the beach. A familiar beach suddenly feels unfamiliar when something lies motionless on the sand, gleaming in the early morning sun. The first reaction isn't curiosity, it's shock. This thing doesn't belong here. In that moment, we realize some sights are enough to shake the sense of safety we've always taken for granted. The longer you look, the more uneasy it gets. The curved shape, the shiny surface, the proportions that confuse the mind when trying to name it. It's not like a dead fish, and not like any sea creature you've seen in books. The video has no music, no narration, just the steady sound of waves, making the scene feel eerie and overwhelming, as if the ocean just gave back something that shouldn't have been disturbed. In Revelation 13:1, "And I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads." The Bible isn't describing biology here, it's explaining symbols. The sea in Scripture often stands for chaos, the place where forces beyond human order rise up when the time comes. The camera pans closer. The tail is unusually long, the scales reflecting light like metal, a strong fishy smell mixed with something hard to describe. The person filming keeps their distance, as if instinct warns not to get too close. Now it doesn't feel like fear anymore, it feels like being watched, as if this thing isn't lifeless, like it appears. Isaiah 27:1 says, "In that day, the Lord will punish with his sword, his fierce, great, and powerful sword, Leviathan the gliding serpent, Leviathan the coiling serpent. He will slay the monster of the sea." Here, the Bible acts as a key, reminding us that giant sea creatures aren't just legends. They're images of powers held back until the day they're revealed. Scientists show up later with the usual explanations: a decaying animal carcass, ocean currents, pollution, those globster things that have happened in many places. The reasoning is solid, the terms clear, but it still leaves something unexplained. If it's just rotting remains, why does the shape match ancient descriptions so closely? And why do similar cases keep popping up all over the oceans? Job 41:1-2 poses a challenge. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook or tie down its tongue with a rope? That question isn't looking for a scientific answer. It's reminding people of the limits of what we can know. One side is science, trying to box in the phenomenon. The other is the Bible placing it in a bigger picture of judgment and upset order. Which way of understanding are we leaning toward? This doesn't have to be believed right away, but it's hard to brush off. When the sea starts giving back images that unsettle people, it's usually not a sign of calm times. If this tale is just the first piece surfacing from depths we've never reached, then what's still hidden under those dark waters, waiting until it can't be ignored anymore? 2. The sun wrapped in a strange, beautiful halo all around. The sky was clear blue, with soft white clouds drifting by, and the sun wasn't glaring harsh like usual. Instead, it was surrounded by a gentle, glowing ring, so bright it felt almost unreal. That moment didn't scare anyone. It filled people with a quiet, holy feeling that's hard to put into words, like the heavens were sharing an old secret straight out of ancient dreams. As the video went on, the clouds slowly took on the shape of widespread wings, cradling the light in the center. There was no wild movement, no odd sounds, just steady, spreading light that made the whole scene feel sacred and mysterious. In that instant, we weren't just watching. It was like we were invited to stand still and take in something beyond everyday life. Luke 21:25 says, "There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea." The Bible doesn't explain these things in a scientific way. It hints that the sky has its own way of speaking, and sometimes it chooses the right moment to say something. The halo in the video wasn't blinding bright. It was soft, like it belonged right there. Everyone who's seen it feels the same mix, peace along with a deep stir inside. Maybe that's because its beauty isn't just for looking at. It's meant to wake up something deeper in us, where faith and doubt live side by side. Joel 2:31 talks about another picture. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. Not every sign looks like instant destruction. Some come gently first, like a quiet reminder that the usual order of things is about to shift. Of course, debates popped up right away. Weather experts say it's just a halo or sun rays, light bending through ice crystals in high clouds. Their explanation makes sense. It's solid, and you can't brush it off easily. But alongside that, millions of people looking at these images feel something hard to explain with formulas or technical terms. Matthew 24:30 offers another thought. "Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." When you set this phenomenon next to Bible words, the question isn't really about right or wrong. It's about which voice we're listening to more, plain reason, or that quiet tug of faith inside. No matter how you see it, that sky moment left a mark no one can deny. And if this is just a gentle hint, a sign coming in peaceful beauty, what will happen when the sky doesn't just whisper anymore, but truly opens up? 3. Sudden blizzard at Donner Summit. In just a moment, the sky turned dark, the wind started howling, and snow poured down like a waterfall. Donner Summit got swallowed up by a storm that hit faster than any warning. Sensational headlines spread quickly. Shaky videos showed thunder booming through thick snow, leaving viewers breathless, like nature had just slapped us hard for being too confident. Donner Summit in California sits at about 7,000 feet up in the Sierra Nevada. It's used to tough winters, but this one went way beyond forecasts. I-80 came to a standstill. Hundreds of vehicles got stuck, and rescue crews had to stop because it was too dangerous. Weather experts warned this was a rare extreme mix. Deep cold air rushing in suddenly, strong moisture building up, creating thundersnow, thunder and lightning in a blizzard, something many folks never see in a lifetime. The storm's speed made it all so scary. Snow piled up to around 3 feet in less than an hour. Visibility dropped to 0 in the whiteout. Temperatures fell more than 40 degrees in a short time. Lightning ripped through the white curtain. Thunder echoed like a rebuke. The air smelled of cold metal, making anyone there feel truly helpless. Have you ever wondered, if you were stuck on that pass, what you'd hold on to keep going? The Bible comes through with a straightforward warning. Job 38:22-23 says, "Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle?" Those old words suddenly ring out in our modern world, reminding us that snow isn't just a weather event, it's power held back for the right moment. Scientists talk about pressure systems, jet streams, and atmospheric patterns, while advising people to stay put, prepare for survival, and respect nature. Their tone is cool and neutral, but underneath is real concern. These extreme events are happening more often. Proverbs 25:13 reminds us, like the coolness of snow at harvest time, is a trustworthy messenger to those who send him. He refreshes the spirit of his masters. A warning, if we listen, can save lives. Then comes the final word, heavy as falling rock. Revelation 16:21 records, from the sky huge hailstones, each about the weight of a talent, came down on people. For the plague was terrible, not to scare us senseless, but to make us pause, look up, and think. This blizzard is a wake-up call, reminding us of our limits before greater power. And while snow can drop any time, the question hangs open. If this is just the start, are we ready for the storms to come? 4. Flooding in Sacramento Valley. It came on fierce and heavy, the water rising without warning, swallowing up the Sacramento Valley in just a few hours. Familiar roads turned into raging rivers, and thousands of families were suddenly in emergency mode. This wasn't just another weather report. It was the kind of moment that makes you stop and face what's happening right in front of us. Have you ever thought that overnight, everything you've built could vanish under that muddy water? The tension built in every frame as cameras caught the water spilling over riverbanks, flooding neighborhoods, rising minute by minute. The numbers hit hard. Water levels jumped nearly 10 feet in some spots. Dozens of roads were cut off. Thousands of homes lost power, and evacuation orders went out in desperation as time ran short. Local authorities kept urging folks to leave right away, admitting the flood control systems had been pushed past their limits. In that cold water were images of helpless residents watching their belongings get submerged, cars flooded to the roof, fields disappearing under endless water. Many families rang in the new year in makeshift shelters, the distant sound of fireworks, a bitter contrast to the tears and heavy silence inside. The news came fast and straight. No sugarcoating, no hype, just the raw truth of what was unfolding. The Bible comes across like a serious indictment for humanity. Matthew 24:38-39 says, "For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away." Those words ring out like an accusation of our indifference and complacency in the face of repeated warnings. Then Genesis 7:11-12 describes it in detail. "In that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. And rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. It's no longer some ancient tale. These images seem to mirror the footage of floodwaters roaring through the Sacramento Valley today. Of course, opposing views popped up quickly. Weather experts explain it with the idea of an atmospheric river, saturated soil, and climate change making extreme weather worse. That explanation has solid science behind it, and many see it as a reasonable way to understand things. But others wonder, why does the suddenness and destruction match those old descriptions so strangely? The debate goes on, with neither side fully winning out. No matter how you look at it, this flood is a stern reminder that our safety is more fragile than we think. And the cliffhanger hangs there. If this is just one small chapter in a bigger chain of events, then when the waters rise again, what will still be standing? 5. Serpent-like fire in Monument Valley. It's shocking right from the very first moment. The camera catches a long streak of bright red fire, twisting and turning across the desert rocks like something alive in Monument Valley. It doesn't spread wildly like a normal forest fire. Instead, it crawls along, curves its body, and then stops at just the right time, leaving you with a creepy feeling like the fire is looking back at you. The sight is so stunning that you can't help but wonder, is this just fire? Or is something bigger being shown to us? As the video goes on, the movements look mysterious and strange, almost like the fire has a mind of its own. The flames stretch for miles, bending along the hillsides, sometimes slow, sometimes speeding up, uncovering layers of deep red ancient rock underneath. There's no random spreading. It has a weird rhythm, like it's drawing a familiar shape on this sacred ground. When you watch those scenes, do you feel like you're seeing a message written in fire? The Bible comes in as a way to understand the symbol. Revelation 12:3 says clearly, "Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads." The image of a red dragon, twisting and full of meaning, seems to match the streak of fire crawling across the land, leading many people to believe this isn't just a natural event. Next, Numbers 21:6 adds to the picture. "Then the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, so that many of the people of Israel died." These fiery serpents in the Bible aren't just animals, they stand for warning and judgment. When you put those words next to the footage from Monument Valley, many believers think the fire is bringing back an ancient symbol that was written down thousands of years ago. From another angle, Isaiah 14:29 talks about how the symbol carries on. "Do not rejoice, all you Philistines, that the rod that struck you is broken. From the root of the snake will come a viper, and its offspring will be a fiery flying serpent." For them, the twisting fire isn't random. It's the next step in an image that was already hidden in the Bible, now showing up in our modern time. But experts and scientists have a different explanation. They say the local winds, dry plants, and rock shapes guided the fire and made it curve like a snake. To them, it's just physics and the land doing what they do, with no symbolic or spiritual meaning. One side sees a holy message, the other sees the laws of nature. Which explanation do you lean toward? Whether it's science or faith, this serpent fire image still makes people stop and think about old symbols coming back to life right in front of us. And the big question hangs there. If this streak of fire is just a small sign, then when the real great dragon shows up, what's going to burn next? 6. Glowing mountains. There was no explosion, no siren, just a heavy silence settling over the Rocky Mountains as the sun went down. In that moment, the peaks suddenly turned a bright orange red, like they were glowing from the inside. But there wasn't any smoke, no heat, no sound at all. That eerie quiet made anyone watching feel like nature was holding its breath, waiting for something to be revealed. As the light spread, the whole range, stretching nearly 50 miles, lit up like a giant wall of fire hanging between sky and earth. It happened slowly, almost magically, more like a ceremony than some random shift in the light. The red color didn't flicker or jump around. It stayed steady in a strange way, as if an invisible hand was placing the glow on each slope. Standing there in front of it, it's hard not to feel small, quietly watching something way beyond our control. The Bible comes up a lot as a way to think about this scene. Exodus 19:18 says, "Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently." Even though the Rockies weren't shaking, that fireless glow still reminds many believers of times when God showed His presence through mountains. Then Psalm 104:32 adds to the picture. He looks at the earth and it trembles. He touches the mountains and they smoke. In this view, mountains aren't just lifeless rocks. They're silent witnesses to ultimate power. When light covers them without burning anything, maybe it's a reminder that real power doesn't need destruction to prove itself. Still, scientists and photographers explain it with a familiar term: alpenglow, caused by low sunlight hitting minerals on the mountain surfaces. To them, it's just natural beauty that happens year after year, with no deeper meaning. That makes sense, but it leaves a question open. Why do these sights show up so often, right when the world is facing one upset after another? Some folks believe the Bible goes even further with its hints. Revelation 8:8 says, "The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze with fire, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood." The mountains aren't falling or burning yet, but the image feels like an opening note, hinting at bigger things ahead. When mountains can glow without any real fire, maybe the point isn't nature's strength, but how fragile we are in front of things we don't fully understand. And the question still hangs there. If this is just a warning light, Then when that light turns into actual fire, where will we be standing? 7. Winged figure falling from the sky. The unease didn't start with a big bang. It started with that chilly feeling down your spine when a video pops up and vanishes so fast you're not even sure you saw it right. A winged, human-like figure dropping from the sky onto a California beach. In that quick moment, folks watching got pulled into this hard-to-describe, uneasy feeling, like the line between what's normal and what's forbidden just got ripped apart right in front of us. From what little bits remain of eyewitness accounts, the figure was about 8 feet tall, skinny and long, with pale skin that stood out against the gray sky. The wings spread out for just a second, not flapping hard, no engine noise, and then the body plunged almost straight down, landing on the sand in scary silence. The video spread like wildfire on social media. Then they all disappeared at once, leaving behind blurry copies and chopped-up versions, like something was trying hard to hide the most important details. What got erased only made the story feel more mysterious. The timing lined up with a surge in UFO reports along the West Coast, plus those odd events earlier in Las Vegas and Chicago. Online folks started piecing together the bits and pieces, scattered clues forming a picture that's equal parts curious and worrying. It's tough not to wonder why these images vanished so quickly. When you compare it to the Bible, the tone gets heavier, like an old accusation coming back. Revelation 12:9 says, "The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him." The idea of being hurled down hits like a charge, not against people, but against beings that used to be up high. Then Isaiah 14:12 asks in a judging way, "How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations." This wording makes a lot of folks think of a fall that's final, a loss of status with no way back. And Jude 1-6 wraps up the charges. "And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day." Here, the fall isn't just dropping, it's being exposed and waiting for judgment. Of course, not everyone online agrees. Some say it was just a big seabird, an experimental drone, or an illusion from the camera angle and light. Others question if algorithms were manipulated to delete the videos and prevent panic. Each view starts from the same basic facts but ends up in totally different places, and that split is what makes the whole thing even more tense. So for you, what's scarier? A winged figure dropping down, or the idea that we might never get to see the full truth? That scene ends in quiet, but the echo lingers. If one being fell in broad daylight, right in front of thousands of eyes, then how many other movements are still hidden up in the sky above us, not ready to show themselves yet? 8. Volcanic eruption at Kilauea, Hawaii. Kilauea cracked open wide. The ground split right in the middle of the day, with lava shooting up like the island's foundation was being torn apart from deep inside. No sirens had time to sound, no drill could keep up. It was just this raw force rising up, not asking permission from anybody and not waiting for folks to get ready. Videos going around show the earth breaking into cracks miles long, bright red lava spraying hundreds of feet high, with temperatures hitting around 2,000 degrees. A USGS webcam near the vent got burned up in seconds. The last image was a blinding glow, swallowing the whole screen. Watching that, you realize modern tech can suddenly feel helpless in a scary way. The chaos spread fast. Local authorities kept updating evacuation maps, worried the lava flows might shift without warning, while experts said pressure underground wasn't steady yet. People near the eruption zone packed up in a panic. Many left their homes behind, seeing familiar roads blocked by fire and smoke, not sure if they'd ever get back. In the Bible, the idea of the earth opening its mouth isn't new, and this time it feels like a direct reminder. Numbers 16:32 says, "The ground opened its mouth and swallowed them, their households and all the people who belonged to Korah, along with their possessions. It's not just a natural disaster. It's pictured as exposing rebellion and its consequences in words that hit hard. As smoke and ash covered Hawaii's sky, another passage comes up with the same heavy tone. Revelation 9:2 reads, "He opened the shaft of the abyss, and smoke rose out of it like smoke from a huge furnace. The sun and the air were darkened by the smoke from the shaft." Anyone who saw Kilauea at its peak described the air turning dark, the strong sulfur smell, and sunlight getting blocked like it was swallowed up. Then Psalm 144:5 stands out as a final reminder. "Lord, bow your heavens and come down. Touch the mountains so that they smoke." Here, the mountain isn't just sitting there. It's the spot where heaven and earth meet, and one touch is enough to shake everything. Scientists explain it with magma pressure, plate movements, and known eruption cycles. But at the same time, locals talk about that deep, old fear, like the ground isn't solid anymore. Both views sit side by side, one based on data, one on gut feeling, and neither fully eases the worry spreading around. The lava keeps flowing, the cracks keep glowing, and the real question isn't how Kilauea erupted, but what bigger thing it's pointing to. If an island can get ripped open in a moment, how long can this earth hold together when similar cracks show up in lots of places at once? 9. Synchronized volcanic and geothermal activity across the U.S. It's no longer just one hotspot. Now it's several places stirring at the same time, like some unseen hand is tapping out a rhythm across the whole continent. Alaska, Washington, Wyoming, names thousands of miles apart, suddenly speaking the same language. The ground is shifting. The watchers aren't whispering anymore. They're sending urgent signals, because when multiple spots wake up together, silence is the most dangerous thing. From Alaska, thin ash drifts up at Great Sitkin, sensors picking up dense clusters of tremors. At Mount St. Helens, the ground swells a bit, gases escaping steadily like quick breaths. Yellowstone bubbles under its crust, hot springs changing their eruption patterns, the land stretching inch by inch. USGS and AVO keep sending updates one after another. Local authorities raise monitoring levels. Folks get uneasy, facing a picture with no shared cause. Matthew 24:7. "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places." These words don't stand alone. "In various places" rings true right when hotspots spread over thousands of miles all rumble together. Not one crack, but a series of warnings happening at once, making the idea of coincidence feel thin. The scale grows fast. From the Alaska Arc to the Cascade Range, from craters to geothermal fields. Alerts spread across the news. Hotlines get flooded with calls, red maps overlap, emergency meetings happen overnight. Where are you when those red dots all blink at once? And if they're not saying the same thing, why are they waking up together? Joel 2:30. "And I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. When gas and steam shoot up in pillars, when ash and heat cloud the sky." These words come like an indictment, questioning our indifference to one sign after another. Some say tectonic plates, built-up pressure, natural cycles. It sounds reasonable, familiar, but why are those cycles syncing up nationwide? When there's no common cause, but there is a common timing, coincidence starts losing ground. The watchers stress. Denying the signs doesn't make them go away. Revelation 16:18. "There were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a great earthquake such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake." The words stamp themselves on the picture taking shape, not to spread blind fear, but to force conscience to face an unprecedented harmony. When the tremors are still small, but enough to hold a whole continent breathless, the question hangs in the air and won't drop. If these warning beats are harmonizing today, Then when the full chorus rings out, what will hold firm? 10. Massive wall clouds and sky anomalies. The sky darkened, like it was slowly closing its eyes, with low clouds rolling in to form a thick wall, and the light fading bit by bit into a strange kind of gloom. In that moment, have you ever looked up and wondered, if the sky could speak, what would it be trying to tell us? This wasn't just an ordinary rainstorm. It felt like being enveloped, as if the space overhead was bending down real close. From Cincinnati to New Mexico, videos going viral show huge wall clouds swirling around, pink and purple hues spreading through the thick layers, lightning flashing with hardly any thunder. In that quiet stretch, a low metallic trumpet-like sound echoes, like a horn calling from some unknown height, leaving folks standing still, unsure if it's the wind, some resonance, or something else beyond what we usually name. Joel 2:30, "And I will show wonders in the heavens above and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and billows of smoke." Those Bible words come to mind quietly, but they fit remarkably with the picture of low clouds, haze, and covered light. When the sky turns into a stage for these signs, a sense of mystery slips into every breath. People who've seen it describe the sky like it's whispering at first, then suddenly speaking up. The sounds don't last long, but they're enough to plant the thought, this isn't just weather. Online platforms are full of questions, debates, and even prayers, as if deep down, we're all reaching for something solid when the overhead world isn't silent anymore. Revelation 8-6-7. The 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets got ready to blow them. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up. The image of 7 trumpets doesn't feel so distant when those sky horns ring out amid wall clouds and fiery flashes, like a verdict spoken in nature's own language. Back at Sinai long ago, the sky shook too. Exodus 19:16. On the morning of the 3rd day there was thunder and lightning, with a thick cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. When you compare them, that familiar feeling comes. Every time God speaks, the space above changes color and makes sounds that folks can't ignore. When wall clouds cover everything and trumpet sounds echo, it's an invitation to listen, to take a good look at ourselves, and to realize the sky isn't just for sun and rain. It carries messages that last through the ages. If those sounds are just the opening notes, then when the final trumpet blasts, what will it awaken in each of us? And so we move through the 10 signs the Lord has cleverly warned humanity about for the end times. When I put it all together, the fire bursting up from the ground, the waters rising and swallowing the shores, the sky going dark and making strange sounds, a bigger picture starts to come into focus. These aren't just random events happening one after another. They're different voices all speaking up at the same time, like nature itself is knocking on the door of our hearts, reminding us that we're not living in ordinary days anymore. 1 Thessalonians 5:2 says, "For you yourselves know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night." That verse isn't meant to scare us. It's meant to wake us up. A thief doesn't send a warning, and only the people who are already awake notice when the door starts to move. All these signs around us, whether they look natural or mysterious, are pointing to the same thing. Time isn't just drifting by anymore without us noticing. In the quiet that comes after all the chaos, people usually have 2 choices. They can say it's all just coincidence, part of the usual ups and downs of the earth, and go right back to life as usual. Or they can pause, listen, and ask themselves where they really stand in this bigger picture. The signs don't force anyone to believe, but they do make us face questions about faith, responsibility, and being ready. Matthew 24-42 says, "Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come." The kind of watching the Bible talks about isn't panic. It's living with our eyes open, knowing what really lasts and what's only temporary. In a world full of changes, that gentle call keeps coming, steady and quiet, like a small light shining in a long night. If what you've seen lately has touched your heart, take a moment to stop and think. You're welcome to leave a short prayer down below, or just an honest thought from your own heart, as a way of answering what's happening around us. Every word you write isn't just letters. It's a sign that someone is listening. Hebrews 10:23 says, "Let us hold tightly, without wavering, to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep His promise." In that hope, we don't walk alone. Connecting with each other, sharing, and staying awake together keeps the light from going out on these darker days. If this string of signs means something to you, please like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next reminder. Every share might be the way someone else wakes up at just the right time. Finally, thank you for reading all the way to the end, and I'm praying that you and your loved ones will always have peace, protection, and guidance in His light. Amen.
Late last night and early today, at my direct...
Okay, that was President Trump speaking earlier today.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe...
No one is perfect, but who appoints presidents? God, Jesus Christ.
What would happen if every church in a country that's been locked up tight for years suddenly got thrown wide open in just one night? When Trump gave the order to open up all the churches in Venezuela, it wasn't just some political move. It was a signal that shook the world, like a prophetic seal finally getting broken. Church bells rang out after years of silence. Faith rose up from the ruins, and things started speeding up in a way nobody could ignore anymore. Do you feel like something big is finally being allowed to happen? That one action set off a chain of changes coming fast. Religious freedom exploding, power shifting directions, ancient prophecies getting talked about again like they'd never gone quiet. But the real question is, what's coming next? Because not every door that gets opened leads to peace. Before we dive deeper and pull back the curtain on the truth, why not leave a quick prayer in the comments asking for the world to stay at peace? And now, so you don't have to wait too long, let's get right into it with Explosion of Religious Freedom. Trump awakens the silenced churches in Venezuela. On January 4, 2026, hot news stories popped up all over social media and international TV, spreading faster than usual. Trump orders Venezuelan churches reopened after lightning strike. That's the big headline CNN ran, while Fox News highlighted, Maduro captured. Catholic churches open for first time after a decade of crackdown. We're watching a moment where religion, politics, and power clash head-on, way beyond normal predictions. In just a few hours, pictures from Caracas, Maracaibo, and Valencia flooded online platforms. Church doors sealed for years swung wide open, bells rang through neighborhoods that had gone quiet, and thousands of believers rushed in, full of joy and shock. For many folks watching on screens, it felt like seeing a chapter of history fast-forwarded right in front of them. This event ties straight back to Venezuela's long crisis, starting in 2013. After taking power, Nicolás Maduro's government tightened control over society, and religion became a touchy area. Hundreds of Catholic and Protestant churches got shut down. Over 50 priests and pastors were arrested on charges of stirring up trouble, and public worship was strictly limited. It's not just Venezuela. Crackdowns and damage to religious sites have shown up in many places around the world lately. In France, from 2023 to 2025, hundreds of churches were vandalized or set on fire, including the blaze at Église Saint-Germain in La Châtre-Indre on September 29, 2025, with damages around $5 million. In Paris alone, just in 3 days, in August 2025, 2 churches were desecrated, sparking heated debates about Christianophobia in Europe. Right in that global setting, President Donald Trump's decision on January 3, 2026, turned things around. According to military sources, the U.S. launched a quick strike on key targets in Caracas, about 1,500 miles from the U.S. border. The short operation led to Nicolás Maduro's capture and transfer to New York for trial under international law. Soon after, U.S. forces and restructured local security units stepped in on religious controls. Seals were removed, churches were allowed to operate again, and hundreds of detained believers were freed. Sunday services happened openly for the first time in years, with crowds bigger than expected. Amid the flood of news, some observers pointed to Daniel 7:25 as a noteworthy reference. It says, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time." For many, this Bible verse brings to mind times when political power tries to control faith until an unexpected shift happens. Back on the ground, reports from Venezuela described an atmosphere of excitement mixed with chaos. Church bells rang alongside helicopter sounds. Candlelight lit up empty sanctuaries once more, while traces of military conflict lingered outside. This was a moment where straight news and shared emotions almost blended together. But even as joy spread among believers, arguments exploded online. Trump supporters said the action restored stolen religious freedom and showed America's role as a global protector of faith. They shared photos of open churches as proof that military moves can bring positive change. On the other side, critics called it over-the-line interference, setting a risky precedent by tying religion directly to military action. Some analysts warned that using force to free faith could trigger chain reactions, worsening conflicts in already unstable areas. In that wave of opposing views, Daniel 7:25 kept coming up, not as proof of who's right, but as a way to think about cycles of power, suppression, and release that have repeated through human history. The facts show that in just 48 hours after the event, search terms like religious freedom, Venezuela churches, and Trump intervention hit tens of millions of hits. That proves the interest goes far beyond U.S. politics or Latin America. It's a worldwide issue now. In the middle of that info storm, we, the folks watching from screens, are in a unique spot, not right there in Caracas, but seeing every image, every comment, every clashing reaction roll in nonstop. It feels like time is compressed, everything moving faster than we can process. The move to open all churches in Venezuela has, in practical terms, brought back religious life to over 10,000 Catholic and Protestant sites. But symbolically, it raises bigger questions about the lines between power, faith, and a changing world order. And right at that crossroads, the story isn't over. Is this just a one-time action, or the start of deeper changes where things once seen as impossible are now reality? What about you? Looking at the Venezuela events, which side do you lean toward? A needed breakthrough for religious freedom, or a dangerous precedent for the world's future? An ancient prophecy echoes again. Trump's actions in Venezuela were foretold long ago in religious circles. Just as the church doors in Venezuela were closing after that first big explosion of events, another layer of information started coming out, slower, deeper, and leaving a lot of folks who follow this stuff feeling a bit uneasy. The news stories weren't just about military moves or politics anymore. They went back in time, digging up words that had been spoken years earlier. It didn't feel like just hearing the news anymore. It was more like watching an old book quietly turn its own pages. On January 5, 2026, Breitbart ran a piece titled, something like "Ancient Prophecy Links Trump to Religious Revival in Latin America." Around the same time, the Christian Post put out a long analysis called "Biblical Prophecy and Trump's Role in the Religious Struggle." These articles weren't breaking new events. They were asking, had what just happened in Venezuela been talked about before? In those pieces, the name Kim Clement came up a lot. Back in 2007, in a teaching session that was recorded and still available, he mentioned a U.S. leader who's not like the usual moral kings, but who would be used to open doors that have been shut down south of here. When that old video got played again, a lot of people watching felt like they were seeing words that had been overlooked suddenly fit perfectly. What made the match so hard to believe was the detail about the South. Back in 2007, there wasn't any real reason to single out Venezuela as some global religious hotspot. But almost 20 years later, that very country became the place where all the churches got opened up in just a few hours after a military event, exactly like the picture of long locked doors swinging wide open. That strange feeling got even stronger as church attacks kept happening at the same time in other parts of the world. On January 1, 2026, the Vondelkerk in Amsterdam, Netherlands, went up in a fierce fire, with flames reaching about 100 feet and destroying most of the 154-year-old building. Seeing those pictures next to the ones of church bells ringing in Caracas created a stark contrast that many watchers couldn't ignore. The pieces started fitting together on their own. Churches burning to the ground in one place, churches reopening in another, ruin on one side, renewal on the other. That back and forth pushed the story beyond just regular news. Religious analysts here in the US started offering explanations rooted in history. They pointed back to the early 2000s, when some pastors like Lance Wallnau called Trump a modern Cyrus, meaning a leader not from a traditional religious background, but still used to protect God's people. That idea used to seem like a far-off metaphor, until recent events brought it up over and over again. The global picture also made those old prophecies stand out more. In 2023, Europe saw over 2,444 anti-Christian hate crimes, with 62% being vandalism aimed right at churches. Just in Sudan, in December 2025, 2 historic churches were badly damaged during riots. When you put those numbers next to the Venezuela events, a lot of people started talking about a cycle picking up speed. At this point, the Bible isn't being presented as a final answer, but like an old map spread out on the table. Isaiah 45:1 gets quoted a lot in these discussions. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. And I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the 2-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. For many, the image of opening double gates is hard to overlook when thinking about the churches just reopened in Venezuela. But not everyone sees these connections the same way. Secular scholars say people tend to spot patterns after something happens, and linking prophecy to current events might just be a psychological thing. To them, Trump's decisions come from geopolitical calculations, not some preset religious script. On the other side, theology researchers push back that it's not about personal motives, but historical outcomes. They argue that in the Bible, plenty of figures were used not because they were perfect, but because of their part in a bigger flow. The match isn't in tiny details, but in the overall direction of events. Between those two views, we, the ones following every picture and every analysis, are in a unique spot. We're not writing the story ourselves, but we're witnesses to how words from the past and actions in the present seem to cross paths. There are moments when that feeling makes you wonder if it's all coincidence, or if something deeper is at work. The Venezuela events keep adding fuel to these debates, as the U.S. government announced a $50 million aid package to rebuild rundown religious sites. Just days later, big services with over 100,000 people were held in Caracas, mixed with images of lingering smoke from the earlier military clashes. That contrasting picture reminded many of light breaking through chaos. Some observers compared it to the Basilica of St. Mary in Minneapolis, turning into a light show space called Luminescence back in November 2025, where modern tech retold stories of faith. Both carry a similar message. Faith doesn't fade in the dark. It often shines strongest when pushed to the edge. In that bigger picture, Isaiah 45:1 keeps coming up as a key to understanding, not to prove who's right, but to raise questions about people's roles in history's turning points. One view is political, where everything boils down to interests and strategy. The other is prophetic, where events fit into a longer timeline, beyond one term or one lifetime. And right at that crossing point, the question comes up for each of us watching. Are you seeing the Venezuela events as a string of random choices, or as a link in a story sketched out long ago? If these connections keep coming, if other doors open in places no one expects, then Trump's role in all this might not be fully revealed yet. And that's when the bigger question starts to form, leading us to the next part, where the impact of these events doesn't stop in the present, but reaches straight into the future. The future impact of Trump, revival or change in global religion. Not every warning comes with a thunderclap. Some signs show up in the form of a morning news story, scrolling across the screen and gone before we even notice something shifting. When you read or hear those lines, do you ever wonder, what if this isn't just politics? but a turning point for faith around the world? Or are we so used to chaos that we miss the quietest signals? On January 6, 2026, Reuters put out an article with a controversial title, "Trump's Venezuela Move Sparks Global Religious Revival?" The question mark at the end doesn't soften the weight of the content. Instead, it's like an invitation for readers to step into the gray area between revival and change. Trump's action in Venezuela isn't seen as just a regional decision anymore, but it's starting to be picked apart as a catalyst that could spread beyond national borders. Early analyses focused on Latin America, but the story's flow quickly crossed the Atlantic and looped back to the U.S. itself. The shooting at Richmond Road Baptist Church in Lexington, Kentucky, in 2025, which killed 2 people, is still fresh in the minds of faith communities, like an unhealed crack in a place of worship. Less than a year later, the Mormon church fire in September 2025 took 4 lives, raising tough questions about how safe faith is in the modern world. This is where the Bible gets brought up not as comfort, but as a warning. Matthew 24-12 says, "And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold." When violence and hate creep into spots once thought untouchable, that verse rings out like a reminder that love growing cold can start with ignoring the smallest signs. The numbers aren't just dry stats when you line them up over time. In 2018, the U.S. saw about 50 attacks on churches that jumped to over 415 inches 2024, showing a clear upward trend that's hard to deny. Globally, in Germany alone, over 2,000 vandalism cases against religious sites were reported in 2025, turning Europe, the cradle of Christianity, into an uneasy space for faith. In that setting, Trump's move in Venezuela, just about 300 miles from the Colombian border, is seen by many observers as a dangerous or necessary precedent, depending on the viewpoint. A superpower stepping in directly to revive religion in another country opens up the chance for it to spread to Cuba or Nicaragua, where faith communities still face restrictions. The question isn't will it spread, but how will it spread? The Bible, in Amos 3-7, states, "Surely the Lord God will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants the prophets." As geopolitical and religious events mix, many believe those secrets aren't hidden anymore, but are showing up through real human actions in modern history. Looking to the near future, one scenario getting talked about more in religious and political forums is Trump pushing for an international religious alliance, crossing national borders and ideologies. Plans to fund a new church complex in Caracas, up to 1 million square feet, are described as a symbol of revival, but also fuel for debate. Faith migrants might flock there, turning the city into a new regional hub for belief. But history shows every renewal comes with pushback. In December 2025, Grace Cathedral in San Francisco stirred up a storm by turning its worship space into an aura light show, blending tech, music, and rituals. For supporters, it's faith adapting to the times, but for critics, it's a sign of watering down the sacred, where the line between worship and entertainment gets blurry. 2 Timothy 4-3 warned early on, "For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers, having itching ears." When tech enters the sanctuary, the question isn't just about form, but about the core of belief in a world craving experiences over quiet. If Trump's religious involvement expands, it could create 2 parallel paths. One is a strong revival of faith communities, where churches become spiritual strongholds amid global chaos, giving a sense of stability and purpose. The other is the risk of politicizing faith, turning religion into a power tool, leading to new conflicts under the guise of protecting the sacred. Right at that crossroads, the Bible speaks again as both warning and promise. Revelation 21-5 says, "And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful." The making new mentioned isn't always smooth, but often comes with sifting and testing people's faith. Trump supporters see him as a decisive leader, ready to act to protect eroding religious spaces, and in their eyes, that brings hope in an unstable world. They believe clear stances can stop faith's decline, creating a new order where spiritual values take center stage. On the other hand, Skeptical voices warn that every intervention has a cost, and history has seen faith twisted plenty of times when tied too closely to worldly power. The spread of the Venezuela model could open a new chapter, but whether it's written in the ink of revival or change is something no one dares to claim for sure. Jeremiah 6:16 reminds, "Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways, and see, and ask for the old paths. Where is the good way? And walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your souls." In the whirlwind of change, the call to return to old paths sounds like a warning that not every new thing leads to peace. When you look at the big picture, from church attacks and news of religious revival to international plans, feelings can swing easily between hope and worry. Hope that faith can be an anchor for a cracked world, and worry that faith itself might get pulled into unprecedented whirlpools.